Good evening. I suppose I should open this broadcast in typical overseas style by saying, hello, Canada. This is John Fisher speaking to you from London. I like that word, London. And believe me, dear old London looks pretty good after 10 or 12 days in the sea of sadness which is Europe. There's no smile on my lips tonight. No traveler can look into the face of misery on the continent and come back joyful. There is so much to stab the heart with grief. Paris, for instance, is no longer the gay, carefree city of the world. There is a heavy, unfamiliar hand over Paris. The struggle of living is so inconvenient, so tough, that people waste their energy in merely existing and trying to get around the prices. I talk to young Frenchmen who are disconsolate. They feel frustrated and fearful of tomorrow. They just can't get anywhere. And they ask me so many questions about Canada and the possibilities there. I lived like a lord in Paris, for I belong to the privileged group of Europe, the travelers with American dollars. He can get anything he wants. Gorgeous French meals and wines served in your room if you like. And the rich French, as they do in England, the rich English can still buy if they want to pay the price. But the poor fellow on a fixed income just beats his head against a stone wall. I talked to one young Frenchman I met several years ago before the war. He is bright, intelligent, ambitious. He has a wife and one child, and he works for an importing firm. His salary is fixed. And he told me that he hadn't been able to see a moving picture for 2 years. He couldn't indulge in luxuries. He could never take his wife out to dinner. He couldn't buy presents for the baby. He struggled all the time with rent and food prices, and each month he goes behind and can do nothing about it. Paris today is hard-pressed, hard on the middle class and the poor. The gasoline in Paris is awful. It has a terrible stench, and the old-looking cars puff and bark as they putter along. The bread is blackish and tasteless, and the coffee is something that I wouldn't like to see too much of. I left Paris in a sad mood, because it's such a beautiful city, and I took the train for Brussels. Now, I heard that Brussels was pretty good despite the 4 years of German occupation, but I don't think even New York that I have ever seen anything quite like it. The stores are literally bursting with goods, every kind of material. The Belgian shopper can get chocolates and cigars, American cigarettes, Swedish cigarettes, American cars, and British specialty goods that the British would give their eye teeth to get a hold of, Swiss watches, Swedish machines, and all kinds of goods from the Belgian Congo. Brussels is like a dream after Paris. As I said on the news roundup the other night, it is the oasis of Europe, apart from Switzerland. The answer is partly that Belgium has a fabulously rich Congo, and she also has the port of Antwerp, which the Americans used to bring their supplies into Europe. Well, this gave the Belgians dollars. Instead of being down at the mouth and begging people to work hard after the occupation, the Belgians said, sure, work hard, but we'll use our dollars to get things that we've been without for years. The joker is, though, that the prices are so high that again the old squeeze game goes on, and the poor people and the fixed salaried workers find it very tempting, those stores. But the francs just won't stretch. I took the plane from bulging Brussels to Prague, and again I was in a different world. Prague is sad and grim, and the Czech diet is one of the toughest in Europe. It is below the calorie requirements set by international standards. The Czechs have a very fair and a strong ration system, though. They're good organizers. But the benefits go to little children and nursing and expectant mothers. The adults get very little. When I get back to Canada, I'll have some interesting statistics on just how much they eat in Prague. It was perhaps the worst city for food that I struck in Europe. Last year, the Czechs were doing fairly well on their diet. But then came the worst summer and the worst winter known in Europe since the Middle Ages. This on top of 6 years of war, occupation, the worst in history, too, and all the misery. It's the big word in Europe today. One hears it more frequently than any other, drought. The Czechs had to slaughter thousands of cattle for beef, and they had no tin to use for canning the meat. Consequently, the meat and milk situation is very grim. And thousands of children depend on the dried milk supplies from across the seas. You have no idea of the importance of these so-called protective foods that we are sending from Canada, the United States, the Argentina, and Australia. Talk to the doctors and nurses, and they'll tell you what it means. Of course, this drought not only hit Czechoslovakia, it was general throughout Europe, especially in the east. Well, Prague is a fascinating old city, and is doing wonders with nurseries and playgrounds and organization. But for my money, the most thrilling city in Europe today is Warsaw. I was told that it would be bad, but I couldn't believe it. Even after I had seen it, it's beyond the comprehension of the human mind to grasp the enormity of the destruction and the awfulness of war. It's hard to conceive that people can still smile. Well, they do. Warsaw is positively thrilling. The vitality of the place amazing. Everybody is working with feverish activity, and they're hacking at the ruins, and there are miles and miles of them. They have no modern equipment. I only saw one machine shovel in my whole tour. They're working with picks and shovels and horse-drawn vehicles and passing the rubble down an assembly line of hands. They told me that there were only 4 buildings untouched in the whole of Warsaw, and it was bigger than Montreal. Just imagine if the whole of Montreal were knocked down. Imagine if all the buildings were leveled flat, and on top of that, thousands of people were slaughtered. Why, in the Warsaw ghetto alone, Hitler's men trapped 56,000 Jews. He ordered his soldiers to corner them in the ghetto, and then set fire to the place, shelled it, leveled it, and not one living soul escaped. And when the war finished, there was scarcely a single living Pole in the whole city of Warsaw. They had been evacuated. And now, they've come back to the cellars and ruins, and they talk once again of a new and a grand city, and their faith and energy is staggering, and their capacity to rebuild almost fanatical. Well, that's the story of the adults. But for children, it's different. And for young people in their late teens and early 20s, the story is hard. Some of them have never known any fun. Take a young boy, age 8, when Hitler walked in. Now he's nearly 20. He's never known anything but rationing and misery. Never had dates like other boys. Never known a home, a new suit, or the thrill of his first dance or first skates. There are thousands of girls in Poland who have never lived through the exciting teens of boyfriends and frills and parties and new dresses and Valentines at school. There were no schools. No place called home where they could come and giggle and tell Mama about what he said. And these things are the delights of living. Why, do you know that in Europe today there are millions of women in the productive years who will never marry simply because there are not enough marriageable men? In some cases, the proportion of marriageable ones 3 to 1, 4 and 5 to 1. Europe must build anew on that kind of a basis. And when you throw in with that the loss of records and the destruction, it's staggering. You know that there are hundreds of thousands of children who still do not know anything about themselves. They don't know what their nationality is. And that's the job of the welfare officers who go to Germany to sort these kids out. A welfare officer will go in and let's say that he has a clue. He thinks a little girl living with a German family is of Czech parentage. He'll visit the family and put many questions with permission of allied military authorities. And the German family will probably lie and claim the girl is theirs. But perhaps the investigator will come upon a Slavic name, and that gives him another clue. He examines records. They then study the little girl's face. They ask her questions, but she knows nothing. Her eyes are big and wondrous and filled with the openness of a child. She speaks only German now. Then the welfare officer will speak to her in Czech, or Polish, or Russian, or French, or Yugoslavian. He'll fire the questions at her, but no response. He'll wave in front of her toys, characteristics of different nations, hoping she'll respond. They will suddenly thrust something in front of her, hoping that she'll exclaim in her original tongue, but no response. These officers run through all the tests, and if they fail, they try 2 final ones. They'll sing lullabies in different languages, hoping for some light in the child's eye. And when that fails, they'll usually employ the most thrilling word in the English language, mother. They will say mother in Czech or Polish or Russian or French or Belgian in the hope that that will open some inner door. And the strange part is that it doesn't always, for so many thousands of children don't even know what mother means. But when this trick brings response from a little kid, then the problems of welfare start anew. Perhaps the child responded to the Czech word for mother, so they think maybe she is Czech. But who is she? She can't tell them, for she has lost her language and only speaks German now. Where is her mother and father? That poses new problems. Records are searched. Parents of lost children send in pathetic photographs and documents. And then photographs of the child are posted, letters exchanged, and the pathetic search goes on while the child stays in Germany. Allied military authorities will not let the child go until it is proven legally that she is Czech. If there are no parents left, the child will go to a nursery. And in Czechoslovakia, there are thousands and thousands of these war orphans in all countries. But such is the mood of these people to rebuild that Czech families en masse are asking for adoption, begging to take over these innocent victims of man's devilishness. But often in this drama of lost children, the welfare officers do find the original mother or parents. But when the child comes back, she enters the threshold as a stranger, having forgotten her language, unable to speak to her mother now, afraid, lonesome, and now longing for the people who cared for her in Germany. What a mess it is. And there are thousands of cases. Some of them will never be straightened out. But it's surprising what a little care and warm milk and clean clothes and bread and toys will be due. That's where the United Nations comes in. That's Canada's chance. Seize it well, friends. This is John Fisher speaking to you from London.